Hello and welcome, Spring fans. Welcome to Spring Boot Learning, the channel where you learn about Spring Boot and you have fun doing it. Tonight's live stream episode, we're going to be talking about why context matters when it comes to things like software development, architecture, coding solutions, what have you. It seems like there's always a it depends kind of nature to stuff whenever we go looking for answers, whether it's on Stack Overflow here on YouTube or wherever. I'm Greg Turnquist, for those that haven't met me yet. I'm a principal developer on the Spring team. Before we go any further, though, I do want to let you know that starting tonight, there's a special coupon code. If you go to leanpub.com and use the code STREAM5, you can get both of my books at about 50% off. It's a steal, that is in an ebook format. So go check it out. Now, if you want to learn about Spring Boot and have fun doing it, then please feel free to subscribe to the channel and click on the little bell icon. That way you don't miss anything. So why don't we get to it? Now, first of all, this may look a little different. If you've visited any of my other live stream sessions, this doesn't look like my normal studio now, does it? That's because I happen to be on vacation in a certain undisclosed location in Central Florida. But I had this thought on my mind ever since the previous live cast. You see on the if I can post a chat on a previous chat channel. We sit there and ran and talked about DTOs versus entity class. Code. Kids love to disrupt stuff. So we're talking about DTOs versus entity classes, whether or not you can. A lot of times in demo operations, you see people fetch data from a repository and pass it right on through either to the template or the API. And other people will come in and say, you need to be using DTOs. You need to put in a little bit of flexibility, a decoupling between the two. And I talked about that. I went into depth. Go into the stream here, and you can, in the chat channel, you can find a link to that other live stream session. We went into detail and talked about that, and it seems like a lot of you really enjoyed that. But something I tried to put in there was it depends on what you're doing. If you're building a full-fledged production application, then that's absolutely the strategy to go, to use DTOs and entities. But sometimes sometimes you're given a coding demo. You're talking on a live coding session on YouTube, or you're at a conference talk up on stage giving a presentation for 30 minutes. And in that case, it may not be in your best interest to go do that. So in this case, the context matters. And as I talked about that at that live session, and after I wrapped it up, the conversations kept going through my mind. I kept thinking about other people I'd interacted with where this whole concept of context matters kept coming up. And I was like, I wanted to go delve into that some more. I really wanted to discuss these concepts in much more detail. And I thought, what's the perfect way to do it than to share it here with you on a live stream and to do that. And my family, we packed up to go for a vacation trip, and the missus went out to go hang out with one of her friends that used to live in when we used to live in this area, still does. And I thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity. I want to get on here. Let's talk about it. Let's throw out the ideas. Let's get your comments. If you've got questions on this, put them in the chat sessions, or put them in. If you're watching this on the replay, put your questions in the comments. Let's keep it going. Whether you're here for the live event or the replay, I think this conversation's for you. What does it mean to say the context matters? That sounds like a fancier version of it depends. Whatever you're doing, whatever the situation is, it depends. And something I see pop up from time to time is, this is not the way you should solve the problem. You should solve it using this pattern, or you should solve it using this technology or this strategy. And somebody else will say, well, it depends. There's a friend of mine that's a very savvy developer in the Nashville area. He's helped me run the Nashville Java user group for several years. And he's somebody that I think of as sort of a coding skeptic or a software skeptic. He's very resistant. I'm not going to say his name here because I haven't had a chance to chat with him directly to get permission to use his name. But anyway, he's kind of a skeptic. I've seen people present things like test-driven design, test-driven development is the way to go, kind of unconditionally. And he's like, well, is that really true? A lot of people enjoy that. A lot of people have used that. There's companies that have built their bread and butter on that kind of thing, but is that always true? And I've seen him go on podcasts and debate that and discuss it. And let's take this apart. And what does it mean? And actually, in listening to him comment on that, it kind of reversed my opinion. I kind of felt that I had a very simplistic attitude towards that. That I had a very, I call it naive sense of, well, everybody else told me it was a good idea. But something that I had started to learn with doing development on the Spring team is that not everything has to be grounded in go write a test case, then go write some code, because that's what test-driven development is. Not everything is built around this very laid down pragmatic directive. Write the test first to capture requirements and verification, and then go write the code. Something I've seen in developing framework code on the Spring team is sometimes you have to just start coding a solution. Sometimes you have to tinker with it. I don't mean release it and put it out there without any testing. What I'm talking about is sometimes I have to sit there and start fiddling with the API, or if I'm building a Fluent API to configure something or to set up something, I need to go tinker with it, use it. And once I start to kind of get the feel of it and it becomes concrete in my hands, then I can start writing some test cases to deliver it. So I'm very much a fan of delivered code needs to come with new test cases or updated test cases, or you need to verify at least what, say, a bug is with the test case, expose the bug with the test case, and then from that point, show that your solution fixes it. But to say you have to write a test first, well, I don't know about that. I'm not sure that I agree with that in all cases. So in that case, I'd say it depends. Now, my learned colleague that I was just talking about in Nashville, he's actually thrown out the question of, do you really absolutely, every time you deliver a feature, have to deliver test cases? He's up for like, let's debate that. Let's take that apart. Let's do all the cost benefit analysis on that one. Is that really something that we've got to do at all costs or not? And that is a great debate to have. I think it's fine to ask the question, do we really need to do that or not? So far, test cases have really served me well in building framework code and when I'm working with a technology that is very testable, that has a lot of test toolkits, that is very supportive of these methodologies. But the previous job that I was at, was not coding in Java. I didn't have access to such tools. I didn't have all that. To actually slow down and test everything would have actually tentatively interfered with our schedule, that we had some very hard deadlines to meet or we didn't get paid by the customer. And so in that situation, you may say we have a different test regime. We have different test standards. We have different approaches to do. And in that case, every change we made on that contract went through a test bed, and we had to schedule time with some test engineers to go check it out through manual procedural steps. So maybe it wasn't as thorough as some things could be, but in that situation, that was an acceptable level of risk. In that situation, you could say the context matters. I keep saying context. We're certainly not talking about a Spring application context. We're talking about what's the circumstances surrounding a thing, surrounding what you're doing. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? What's the context that you are under? And when somebody comes to you with a rule or a paradigm or a concept, what context are they in? Because actually their approach to say, this is a very good way to go, this is an excellent paradigm to adopt, may be very applicable to their context, but what if they're different than you? You know, one of the biggest things that it's taken me to get the hang of, to learn, to internalize since I joined the Spring team back in 2010 was, before that time frame, I was writing application code. In one case, I'd worked for 10 years on a contract. And so we delivered applications and we had this one customer. It was about 400 users, but still one customer that we interacted with on the contract. So we were building an application that served one person, if you will, or one entity. And it's kind of interesting that, the solutions we use there, they really fit their situations. We had to really understand the business of what they were doing. In this case, we were monitoring a nationwide network of devices. We had 400,000 devices bringing in 10,000 alarms a day, and we had to correlate alerts to detect outages in the system and mobilize repair teams. And then we had to credit the customer if we had an outage. We had to detect all that. Well, we took that concept and we went and sold it to other customers. And so there was a totally different development team that took our solution and went and reapplied it to somebody else. And they were discovering that some of the stuff we had done didn't apply to the other customer. There was a slightly different context. So the paradigm of who you're solving for shifts based on who you're selling it to. But there's another factor in here. I'd worked for 10 years building the system for essentially one customer. And then when I left that company to go work for the Spring team, I found out I was sitting down and working on code that's made for literally millions of people to go build a framework that millions of people can use in a more generic capacity. Comes with a whole different set of standards that you operate against. I started learning the value of what we called back in the day clean code. Now, sometimes if you start talking about clean code, there's people that challenge that metaphor. It's like, is that something you can, what is clean code? It's highly subjective. I accept that. But we did have a paradigm. We had a standard bearer set forth with Jürgen Haller, who's one of the founders of Spring Source, the creators of Spring in the first place, the original Spring framework, and who's still on our team. Jürgen had a very high standard of code cleanliness, or at least stylizing the code, a very consistent approach. And I saw that sort of picked up and carried forth by other people like Phil Webb or Oliver Drotbaum. And the idea was like, don't mix tabs and spaces, pick one and stick to it. Have a consistent method of like public methods and then private methods below that. There's some variations between the projects, but there was a certain level of effort put at let's format the code in a very highly consistent manner so that when you come back and read a chunk of code a month later, you're not disjarred by seeing it in a chaotic fashion, different from what you just came from. Instead, we need a sense of order to all this. Something I'm aware of if you go into physics and study the laws of thermodynamics, and the third law of thermodynamics, entropy grows over time. Things fall into chaotic patterns unless you exert energy, unless you pour energy into the system to restructure it. So on the Spring team, there's a lot of it. I don't know if I want to say a lot of effort. There's a very consistent level of effort put into code polishing, code cleanup, code styling, because we're trying to maintain a code base that's used by literally millions of people. And that's a different strategy, a different context than if I'm going to go talk to a developer that's having to build a system for one customer. They may have different standards, different timetables, different timeframes when they got to be doing stuff. And for me to have all my trainings and lessons and life lessons and paradigms that I've picked up in working on Spring code to go over and tell somebody how he needs to build it for an application is frankly kind of arrogant to me. How can I put forth to this person what to do? It's a really fascinating concept, and something that what I'm really learning in this day and age, it's like when I joined the team, I felt that I felt truly honored to be able to come and join this team, because I felt they were saying, you've got the technical chops to join this team. And I felt, highly uplifted or honored that somebody was saying that I had the skill set for that. But On this team, I've just, it feels like I'm learning something new every day. And the thing that I've been learning of late is that when somebody comes to us with a problem, comes to me with a problem, the first thing I need to do is just stop and listen. What's the problem? Do I understand what the problem is? If somebody's sharing it with me, can I just listen? This is something that Oliver Dropbaum is very good at doing, and I'm trying to follow in his footsteps to learn how to do this right. Which is, what are you trying to accomplish? What is your goal? What are you trying to serve? I've got some very strong opinions on different aspects of technology, but I need to know what your problem is before I start espousing points of view that could be subjective. Because quite honestly, if I'm going to start telling you how to do it and I haven't taken the time to listen to you, you're probably not going to listen to me anyway. Doesn't matter what street cred I carry or what talent that I perceive that I have. If I didn't listen to your problem, if I can't meet you at the problem, at the situation that you're in, what's the point? It's not going to work. We need to build a connection with people we're working with in order to accomplish stuff. And so that's the thing I'm learning now. It's like, maybe I've got the technical prowess to do this, but now I need to develop the communication, the awareness of that. And this is one of the things where it's like, it sounds like a cop-out to go to any Stack Overflow discussion thread or forum chat or Twitter conversation, and after all this communication back and forth, to sit there and say, it depends. I mean, it's a cheap phrase. It depends. Maybe, I don't know. It depends. Because people are kind of sick of hearing that. They want an answer. They're like, I've got this problem. Do I pick A or B? What's the path do I pick? Do I use DTOs or do I use entities? Just tell me the answer and I'll do it. Give it to me. And it's like, it depends. Are you building a full production app? Are you going to be maintaining this for 5? Are you going to hand this off to somebody after 5 years, and somebody else who is not involved in the design decisions, are they going to have to maintain it for 10 years? You probably do need the details. Wait a second. Are you just putting a talk for a conference together? Are you trying to spend a week worth of effort for a 30-minute talk? You probably don't need that. You may want to put in your talk, you may want to hedge that. And if you put a link to that live session that's in the thing in your talk, that'd be super awesome. So yeah, it depends. And no, that's not a cop-out, because that really is genuinely the situation. It seems more and more that never can I find a situation where this rule holds 100%. This rule is always true. I'm afraid that's just not the reality. It just doesn't work like that. So it depends. The context matters. The situation is pertinent to the answer, to what you seek. And this is why I didn't even realize it, that I already had that that idea in my head when I started writing tech books, 12 years ago. So I've published six tech books in a video. And I always liked being able to put out, here's a solution. Here's what Spring does for you. Well, 2 of the books were on Python, not all were Spring. But here's a technology. Here's how it solves it. But here's a pull-out note about, here's the trade-off. This works. This is what I call an 80% solution. But in case you're in the 20%, you may have to go over and look this up. Sometimes I would have a separate section in my book to go into this alternative solution. And sometimes that would take the book too far afield. So I would simply tell them where to go find that. I would say, when it comes to Spring Data, the repository solution may cover, 80%, give or take, of the problem. But in the event you need a highly specialized data warehousing query that's run once a month, that you have to really hand cobble together all the JPA or JDBC or SQL selects, whatever it is, here's your alternative solution with the @query notation. We're not going to go into how to use it, but if you go to the Spring Data JPA reference manual, you can read all about it. So I like giving my readers this kind of opportunity to say, hey, I need to know what the trade-offs are, because everything is a trade-off. In the past, I used to read books on economics, for example, and something I've learned is there are no real hard, fast rules in economics. It's just, what are your trade-offs? What are you willing to exchange in this for that? And it's just kind of applicative. something I had a unique insight to in my previous job is that I was actually put on a software engineering risk management team. That's a lot of fluffy words for we had to get together once a month and look at what was stuff that could go wrong in the system and what were we going to do about it. And something I learned is something doesn't carry risk if there's no dollar associated with it. A risk is something that could go wrong and cost us $100,000. Or if we don't solve this problem, the risk is we could lose $1 million because of technical debt. So the idea is, well, the likelihood of this happening is 1 in 100, or there's a 1% chance that this goes wrong. If it goes wrong, the cost is $1 million. Thus, the risk is on the order of $10,000. So we need to carve out a budget of $10,000 to go try to mitigate the risk. Like if we spend $10,000 worth of effort refactoring the code base and removing technical debt, we could mitigate the kind of risk. And that was something that I went to those meetings and I felt like I was in over my head. This had to be 15 years ago. I would go to these meetings. And I wasn't sure if I knew what I was doing at these meetings, but it gave me a new insight into it depends. Okay. So this is where you're taking let's take this context. Let's try to put a number on it. And this is not the same as estimating lines of code. These kind of things, let's estimate how much level of effort it's going to take to implement this solution. That's 20-year-old software engineering practices that in more modern shops, I don't see them doing that approach very often anymore. Maybe it's happening at your shop. If it is, let us share it with us if you're willing to. But to go to a risk mitigation meeting and be able to say, well, here's a context where things can go wrong. What's the chance it's going to go wrong? What's the impact? What can we do to solve it? Felt like getting a step away from the coding, the raw coding, and knocking out code, and instead let's do some cost benefit analysis on this stuff, which is to me one of the cornerstones of engineering. To move away from computer science and theoretical language structures and instead to start doing trade-offs. Let's assess this. What's the trade-off of this or that? And it's really amazed me with the people that I get to interact with on this team, on the Spring team, how many of them have experience having worked on the front lines of systems like this. I think about everybody that I've had a chat with they've got war stories of having to work on real live systems. So it's a team, we try to work together as a team, and we're not building framework code based on what this is. Okay. We're based on just what we think is going to happen. This is based on real experience. And so it's key to try to tackle, to unravel, to dig down and find out what is the context in this situation, because the context matters. It's important to go find this out. What's up, Aiden?
Well, I don't know how it is so hard for me to sleep tonight.
Okay. I'll be in there in a few minutes, okay? I'm just going to talk a little bit more on the camera, all righty, buddy? Can you go climb into your bed for me?
I'll sit up right here.
Okay, you can lie down here, all right? Lie down here. You don't need to be on the camera. And then there's other contexts we have to deal with. So hopefully you're getting the idea of what I'm talking about when I say the context matters. It's not a cop-out. It's not trying to dodge the debate. It's trying to say that there's some rules. I've got ideas, but let's unravel it some more and try to find out what it is. Now, I want to remind you that for about the next 48 hours, there's this coupon code, STREAM5. If you go to leanpub.com, you can get both of my books, Hacking with Spring Boot 2.3 Reactive Edition and Hacking with Spring Boot 2.4 Classic Edition. The first one's using Project Reactor. The second one uses the classic paradigm of servlets and blocking API calls, things like that. You can go grab both of them at like 50% off. It's a steal. So check it out. Be sure to follow us on Spring Boot Learn. I would have made it Spring Boot Learning, but on Twitter, you can't have a handle that long. So Spring Boot Learn. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon so you don't miss anything. And I'll see you in the next live stream.